His Royal Highness Prince Charles made the final stitch on this, the 1642 panel, the last in the series of 24 that go to make up the new World Tapestry panorama. It deals with the great gardeners and herbalists of Elizabethan and Jacobean times, and the period it depicts shows the last month of peace in England before the Civil War broke out at its end. Scene 1, top. William Turner is a graduate of Pembroke College, Cambridge, and chaplain and physician to Edward Seymour, the Lord Protector and first Duke of Somerset. Turner helped Seymour establish the garden at Sion near London, which still exists today. The main scene shows John Gerard standing on his herbal that is written and which you can still buy copies of today. He was also the master of the Barber Surgeons Livery Company, as I've shown by picturing him holding a barber's pole with a shaving dish at the top. In the background, the labourer is helping the Lord Mayor of London, Sir John Hart, to dig at the springs at Highgate Ponds to improve the city's water supply by running conduits down into the capital. Note the first of the knot garden designs I've put in at the top of the pathway between this scene and the next. Scene 2, top. John Tredescant the elder was a royal gardener, collector of curiosities, and importer of exotic plants. He had a garden at Lambeth, and I've shown him teaching one of his workers the art of grafting trees using the special tools for the job. Tredescant was also gardener to Robert Cecil at Hatfield House in Hertfordshire. Here he poses for the woodcarver who's making the famous carving on a newel post on the staircase at Hatfield. Watching him is Cecil, and in the background is Bessis Oak, the tree that the young Princess Elizabeth is reputed to have been sitting under when the news came that Queen Mary had died, and so she, Elizabeth, would become England's monarch. Scene 3, top. Henry Light, the herbalist, was born at, and still lived, all his life at Light's Carey in Somerset. The house now belongs to the National Trust, and so can be visited. Here we see one of his gardeners trimming the topiary whilst giving the glad eye to one of the housemaids and not paying attention to his work. Light produced a book on herbs known as Light's Herbal, so popular at the time that it was reprinted in 1586, 95 and 1619. John Parkinson was a herbalist who became the apothecary to King James, and I've shown him attending the monarch and applying liberal amounts of herbs to his meal at the palace of Theobald's in Hertford. Lower picture, scene 4. Henry Lord Danvers, Lord President of Munster and the one-time Governor of Jersey, is shown holding a brace of pistols, because he was also a murderer. He had a long-time enemy, a neighbour of his at Corsham in Wiltshire, named Henry Long. So Danvers, together with his brothers and servants, gate-crashed a lunch party being given by Long and shot him dead. He then fled the country, was never tried, and for some unknown reason was pardoned and returned to England. Danvers would always carry the stigma of murderer. However, he did make one claim to respectability, that of being the originator of the first botanic garden in Britain. In 1621, he bought 3 acres of land opposite Magdalen College and created a physic garden to produce samples for the university's faculty of medicine, and created an enormous £5,000 endowment. Scene 5. This scene is mainly about John Tredescant Jr., who was, like his father in scene 2, a plant explorer and a royal gardener. He had 2 acres of land in Virginia, and is shown bringing back many new species which are common in England today. Tredescant had a museum of rarities, and is showing one of his exhibits, Powhatan's cloak, to his friend and fellow plant explorer Bertram Hobart. The Tedescan Museum of Rarities was the first public museum in Britain and the largest in Europe. After his death, it formed the basis of the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. As to its exhibits, I will just pick out two to describe to you. Numbers 2 and 12. Number 2 was Indian Idol, made of feathers in the shape of a dog. Note how I've craftily lifted its back leg. Number 12 was Blood that Rained on the Isle of Wight, attested by Sir John Oglander. Pity they didn't have DNA sampling in those days. King Charles and Oliver Cromwell are having a punch-up at the start of England's Civil War. So I'm going to leave them to it and sign off by putting my paintbrushes in the pot. There. Good. Now for a cup of tea with the 256 tapesters, who, together with old friends like Tom Maddock, Paul Presswell and Frida Simpson, made all this possible. Now, where's the way out to the tea room? Aha, there it is. Cunningly marked exit. Perhaps you'll join me there. Excellent. This panel was stitched by the Lyme Regis New World Tapestry team, led by Barbara Peacock. The first stitch was made by Mr. Roger Pincham, master of the Barber Surgeons Company, in the company's livery hall in London on the 20th of January 1994. Followed by Michael Ward, Master of the Society of Apothecaries, Gordon Ray, Director General, Royal Horticultural Society, Brent Elliott, Librarian, Linley Library, Royal Horticultural Society, Rosemary Nicholson, Tedescan Trust, Andrew Chevalier, Vice President, Institute of Medical Herbalists, Susan Minter, Curator, Chelsea Physic Garden, David Jones, Superintendent, Parks and Gardens, Corporation of London, Peter Maxwell Light, descendant of Henry Light. As I mentioned at the very beginning, the very last stitch was made on Friday, March the 3rd, 2000, by His Royal Highness Prince Charles, at the Prince's home, Highgrove, in Gloucestershire. My wife Sheila had created the third from last stitch, while I had made the penultimate one. It was my only stitch contribution, because I thought it bad luck if I made one part way through the project. For the heraldry on this panel, I've chosen the shields of Thomas Johnson and Nicholas Culpeper. Both were herbalists. Both fought in the Civil War, and both were wounded. However, they were on opposite sides. Culpeper was a Roundhead and was badly wounded, yet survived. But Johnson, fighting on the other side as a royalist, received a shoulder wound from which he died about a week later. For the herbal remedy on this panel, I've chosen fleabane. Gerald the herbalist recommends it because the leaves and flowers are good against the stangury, the jaundice, and the gnawing and griping of the belly. I've often used it before I've given a talk. But hold on, what's that noise?